Dear friends, dear guests, thank you very much for introducing me. I didn't know I have such full CV. Now I have remembered everything you was speaking about now. Dearest Jadranka, thank you for inviting me here. And first I have to congratulate Croatia for its first birthday in European Union. And since I was going through media today, I didn't find very much enthusiasm about the results of Croatia in European Union. So I'm here to tell you, maybe for the first time, the most intriguing and interesting data which concerns also Slovenia. In first 3 months of this year, just in first 3 months, the growth of the economic exchange between Slovenia and Croatia has grown for 30%. If that's not big, that I don't know what big is. 30% of growth only because, I guess, Croatia entered the European Union and the flows of goods are much easier. So this is a big result for exporters in Slovenia and Croatia. Then I would like to tell that my first memory of the cultural diplomacy is from 1965, when my brother was queuing for a whole day to buy tickets for the concert of Louis Armstrong in Ljubljana. It was the first time that Louis Armstrong could have a concert in so-called communist world. And believe me, that concert changed everybody's opinion in communist world. And it was a big turnover, and Yugoslav communism forever turned different of all others. Not because of Louis Armstrong, but also because of Louis Armstrong. I've decided today to not to be extended, but very brief, and I've decided to put my lecture in 4 short notes, 4 short sketches, croquis, about history, about politics, about culture, and about cultural diplomacy. History. What do we learn from history? My personal opinion is, my personal memory is that when I was 10, my grandfather asked me, how was the World War I taught in my school? Since it was the time of Yugoslavia, I told him that the, I quote now, heroic Gavrilo Princip shot Franz Ferdinand to free the nations of Austro-Hungarian Empire from slavery. My grandfather was totally upset by such an answer, because he fought for his Kaiser, Franz Josef, against Italians at the Socha River, where thousands of Slovenians died for their then homeland, Austria. He was also furious with my father, swearing and telling him that such, stupid crap, shouldn't be taught in schools, and that Gavrilo Princip was nothing but bloody Serbian terrorist. And as we see, and as we can see these days, commemorating 100 years of that event in Sarajevo, everybody in Balkans has different feeling about it. So, what do we learn from history? Not much. Or as great Talleyrand would say, if people would understand everything, there would be no history. Second, politics. In the Balkans, politics is exactly the quintessence of its definition. It is the lack of military conflict or war, so it is good. Politics is good as it means discussing, in Balkans vividly mostly, but still discussing in peace. But something that you will not find in the Balkans, or very rarely, is compromise. And that is a problem, because politics, as life as well, is about making compromises almost every day. From the morning that you wake up until the evening, you have to do some compromises, otherwise your life is difficult. And the same goes to relations between the nations. That's why I'm proud, what was already mentioned today by Jadranka, that Slovenia and Croatia reached a compromise by bringing our border dispute which was choking us for 18 years. We brought those disputes to the arbitration tribunal, which was pretty historic success for both sides. In Slovenia, that agreement had to be confirmed even at the referendum. And I remember how public relations experts advised Slovenian government at that time not to use word compromise when advocating in favor of the arbitration agreement, because that word is allusion to a defeat or a loss. When I visited Sarajevo about a year later, I met with one of the leaders of Republika Srpska, and I proposed to him to find a compromise on the constitutional changes that were popular at that time in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He was very frank with me. He told me, Mr. Ambassador, I agree with you. But in Balkans, compromising means only that you get compromised, that you are a loser. I will never forget that, because things there are still as they were when I was visiting him 5 years ago. The Nobel Prize novelist from Balkans, Ivo Andrić, set up maybe the most efficient definition of signs of bad times in the Balkans. He said, there comes a time when reason becomes silent, the idiots start to speak, and lowlifes get rich. Could be that this time is actually now. Culture. Balkans experienced communism, and in communism the culture had a very sometimes extremely political connotation. As a matter of fact, difference between culture and politics in communism sometimes was completely non-existing. It was in 1986, only 3 years before the fall of the Berlin Wall, when Jaroslav Seifert, Czech Nobel Prize novelist, died. Since Seifert was a dissident, then Czech President Gustav Husak sent his telegram of condolences not to the Seifert's family, but to the then Minister of Culture of Czechoslovakia. It was the bluntest way to demonstrate how state and ideology are above individual. So relations between culture and politics are always tricky, and let me tell you here, not only in the East, but also in the West. And it is not just the case that Jean-Luc Godard said this: politics should not influence culture, but culture should influence politics. And now finally, cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy is exactly about how culture should in best positive way influence politics and even more relations between the nations. Reconnecting the Balkans with infrastructure, roads, railways, energy, etc. is of course important. And we are doing this. But much more important is to bring together people who were involved in tragic conflicts and to make them feel free of difficult history and ready for new cooperation. Because the force of memory is important, but the force of forgiving is even more important. We have new roads, new streets, new houses in Vukovar, but we still have old fears among the people. Serbian and Croatian kids are still going to separate classes. Cyrillic is still only being introduced. I have no recipes or big ideas about how to proceed there, but I still remember that concert of Louis Armstrong in Ljubljana. So it would be maybe swell to have a common concert of Serbian and Croatian philharmonics in Vukovar. If we can have it in Zagreb, Ljubljana, and Belgrade, why not do it out of the capitals? Why not do it in Vukovar? Or even more of those concerts. Or meeting of writers, poets from all over of ex-Yugoslavia. And introduced it through cultural diplomacy in that city that has suffered so much. And let me finish with the statement that sometimes a good concert can bring immensely more than hundreds of politicians' visits. Thank you very much.